Before we start today's roundtable, I want to give special thanks to Checkster, our group sponsor. Checkster has become well known in the recruiting industry by providing a platform that easily captures reference checks in the hiring process. I myself have been a customer of theirs for years. I use a reference checking tool for all of my new hires. However, Checkster has now released a new product suite called Insights. This new product suite is really what has excited me to have Checkster as the group sponsor. With Insights, the Checkster platform now covers employees from cradle to grave and not just reference checking, starting when they apply, going to offer, through onboarding, then covering their work at your company, and then to the end with exit interviews. It's an easy to use, easy to understand way of giving and getting feedback from your peers. Checkster's simple goal: to build more productive and passionate teams. Now, if this concept of getting insights from your peers regarding your work sounds familiar, it should, because that's the simple goal of this group: connecting, communicating, collaborating. Support me, support the group. Follow the link below, recruiting.org/Checkster. This will take you to a landing page to sign up for a quick demo. If you are just thinking about automating your reference checking process, it'll be well worth your time. But I encourage you to check out the full Insights suite. I'd love to find out if you feel the way I feel about it. Now let's get to today's roundtable. All right, let's jump right into it. Thank you everybody for attending episode 55 in Let's Talk Recruiting, where peer practitioners across the country get together and talk about various topics on a roundtable format of discussion. If you're here as an audience member, please feel free to add anything into the chat area. Any questions or comments that you might have, that is there for you. We have a topic today, kind of, I don't know if it's a fire alarm situation or a keep it ongoing type situation, but the topic for today is leading a recruiting team, when to jump in with the hiring manager. And we have kind of a bi-coastal presence with us today, East Coast and West Coast. We have John Burke out of the DC area. We have Brenda Tern out of Portland. We have Stephanie St. Peter, also out of DC, and Justin Baxter, also out of the DC area. And I, of course, am out of the LA area in Orange County. So with that said, John, I'm going to jump to you first if you kind of want to kick the show off.
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm John Burke. I work at Great Minds. We're an educational company that works in the K through 12 space. Recruiting wise, we've been growing quickly over the last few years. We hired 411 people last year, and more than that so far this year. So we'll approach 600 hires this year, with about another 500 scheduled next year. A lot of those hires are on the academic teams. They're our product builders. So we hired a lot of people with math, humanities, science background, and then all the usual stuff. We'll probably hire 25 engineers over the next 18 months. Sales has gone up like crazy and everything else. So I think the normal stuff on the operational side for a publishing company. And for us, with all the rapid growth, we try to be kind of the calm in the storm a little bit. So with that, we try to partner with the hiring managers as quickly as we can. Often for us, we're hiring managers in from other organizations that need to kind of learn the Great Minds way. And so we've documented all of our SOPs pretty extensively, and we have regular meetings to keep those updated. None of our SOPs are ever go more than 6 months without a review. So that includes all of our hiring procedures. And again, it may sound corporate-y, but we really aren't in our approach. It's just that we find that it's good to have it backed up to that level. With our departments and with our hiring managers, we very much customize as best we can with each of them, but we have a guideline to follow. We again have some really good technology, I think, that's been effective from the applicant tracking system side, especially, that again helps walk them through what they can and can't do pretty effectively. And it's not labor intensive at all. It's of all the systems we use, it's the one that requires the least amount of training for the hiring manager. So it's easy for them to adopt the technology, which makes it easy for them to follow our processes. But we stay pretty closely aligned with them through the whole thing as we're guiding them through the comp and negotiation. When we, reviewing their job description and going back and asking them questions to make sure that it's going to capture the work that they need done now and in the future. And so I think the short version of all that is that, again, we try to kind of hold their hand through it, especially the first few times, until they kind of get a rhythm on hiring here, because we hire a lot of people. And so it's important that they get good at it.
John, do you have you're hiring? So you're doing official hiring manager training then, correct? Sounds like.
We do. It's a part of our ongoing manager training. It's also something with when new managers are hired, it's a part of their orientation process or onboarding process.
No, so a question for you. I'm going to kind of try to dig down into that because I love that idea of the training piece of it, not just, hey, let us know when you have a need and we'll work with you type deal, which I think you may see at a lot of larger size companies just to keep up with the rec load. Is it, a few slides on the deck, hey, this is where we hire, or is it more in-depth training where you get into interview training or anything like that?
Yeah, I'm fortunate that because I oversee the whole HR function, so I've got the L&D piece as well. So we have them build out. We have the PowerPoints. We'll do a series of like little 3-minute snippets that we can share if there's a specific question over one element of the technology piece or something like that. We have a manager's toolbox that we keep all kinds of just kind of guidelines and SOPs in for them to reference. But one of the things, again, that I really, because again, I can nerd out on the technology side and all that stuff too. I think we all like that part a little bit. But I still think that as far as in HR solutions, they got to be people driven. And so we regularly, I've been on calls all day and we'll continue after this. And a lot of that is meeting with managers, senior managers across the organization, over hiring and everything else. But with this call being, focused on the talent acquisition, we build it out so that, again, there's anybody on our team they can reach out to, and we'll grab them on a call and walk them through those processes.
Excellent. And have you ever had instances where, hey, they know what to do, right? Because of the training and everything like that and the culture of it. Sounds like you're adding the culture side of Great Minds hiring. Do you have any cases where they kind of go rogue? The real world example is they not happy with something and they go to a search firm and you find out because you got an invoice from procurement.
Oh no, that wouldn't happen. Again, as we're very busy and growing, I feel like I don't want to come off as a control freak at all because I'm not. But like stuff like that, we work with some outside firms. We don't work with a lot of them. But if anyone even gives us a hint of any ethical issues or any not being able to follow directions issues or anything like that, we just drop them and we just don't use them anymore. I will have IT, block them from even being able to call us because we just don't have time for it. So happy to use outside recruiters, but they follow our processes, and that involves going through the HR team, the hiring team.
But have you ever had hiring managers just go there? No?
Oh. No, thank goodness.
Congratulations.
I know.
That's a big, good achievement, in my opinion. Usually when I'll go into a large company, I would focus on the sourcing teams, and one of the main goals is to eliminate search firm spend, right? And that's kind of one of the metrics of hey, how much should we decrease? That's a sign of a good sourcing team. And that's where you kind of see, well, when you ask the question, well, how much spend do you have? Well, we got to get that for procurement because the managers go outside the gates basically and stuff like that. So that's always like a first goal to hit, is to kind of get those managers bought in. And if they've already done it, it's really even more empowering to the recruiting team to convince them, hey, we can do what you're paying $40,000 for as part of our salary already.
Yeah, and even the things we do outsource, it's just because of the volume and time to get to it. It's something we agree on what things we're going to outsource just because of the time thing. But I think, again, this is an example of partnering with the hiring managers early and making sure that they understand, again, having the guideline there, having the training there over what would trigger the use of an outside resource and how they can validate whether it's even in their budget and all of that piece too. So.
Yeah, one approach that I've seen when we talk about when to step in, when you do have that rogue hiring manager, is when they do go third party without giving the recruiting team a chance, we would check, okay, here's the new hire, this is where we came from, are they in our system? If they're in our system, it's kind of, oh, by the way, if you would have told us about this need, we could have easily reached out to this person. It's kind of a friendly, hey, come work with us type deal.
We even with, like, again, the firms that we do use, I mean, we make sure we have a really good relationship with them because they're going to follow our procedures and processes. We allow them Slack access to the jobs that they're going to be involved in because we want them to do it successfully. And it's not an ego, us or them. We're asking them to help with that job. And so again, I think there's a lot of trust that we build up with them, just like we do with the hiring manager. Because again, if we're going to trust them to represent us even partially on a hunt, again, we want to make sure that there's buy-in, that they understand our level of buy-in with them, and they have the same thing with us.
So a question for the other panelists. So John's doing, I think, hey, that's how you do it. You get it from the jump. You set the tone, set the culture from the get-go, right? Has anybody had the ability, or have you done this at your company where you are setting the tone as soon as they come in, they start, this is the way we hire here, and then sort of keep that culture going at your companies?
Yeah, I mean, when I started at Udemy a couple of years ago, we didn't have a established recruiting team, so they actually leveraged a lot of recruiting partners, like third party. So when I came on board, we started to build our internal teams, and we started to lay the foundation of, hey, we're going to build out a recruiting partnership with the business, and we're going to start weeding off all of these third-party agencies. Like, I come from the agency world, and so I never forget where I come from, and it's a great foundation. It's a great partnership. So John's point, they're an extension of my recruiting team, and so obviously I want them to flourish. And so we've been able to really minimize the amount of staffing agency usage over the last couple of years, but we still have a couple of partners that we still leverage today, since we are hyper growth mode at this point, hiring a ton across the globe. So obviously we want to maintain those relationships, because, you know, at the end of the day, internal teams can do most of the work, but there are certain niche type of roles that we need to leverage third-party agencies to help with. So we have come a long way from 2 years ago from where we are today, which is really exciting to see.
Stephanie or Justin?
No, I think it's Brenda. When I came to my company about 4 years ago, there was two people in recruiting. So over the past 4 years, we've really grown the department, and we have a rogue hiring manager here. They're not so much using agencies, but they really do rely on us and come to us for guidance. They tend to really not make too much of a move unless they've talked to me or somebody to know what to do. So I think that is just the partnerships that we've been able to build. And then when new hiring managers come on board, we make sure they're comfortable and they know what they need to do, and they have a position they need to fill for their programs. So I feel pretty lucky in that sense.
I likewise, we had, I think, 5 or 6 agencies when I was just building out the sourcing team, and I think the savings were exceeding, I think, 2 million at this point year to date in staffing agency costs. So I can validate, you know, having more staff, more technology, and then offset that with saying, well, you know, that's a drop in the bucket if you're paying fees, you know, and you know, just doing line item of the agency cost. So actually being able to slowly build that case and literally one by one knock out each agency is really validating. I've done it, you know, throughout my career in building sourcing teams. So I actually come in and revel looking at the staffing agency bottom line, and then being able to go directly to my VP of TA and ultimately the CHRO who goes to the board, right? And say, you know, we were able to cut XYZ costs with, you know, let's say maybe a $200,000 investment and some sourcers and some tech. And it's saved us, 1.8, 1.7 million roughly, you know, like all in, right? So we've been able to do that year to date, and I'm still cranking. I mean, there's some executive search firms who are still doing some work, but I'll eventually get to them. It's just a matter of time. So inevitably, they'll all be completely obliterated, from the organization, which will save money ultimately for my board of directors and my CHRO. So I actually enjoy doing that, going through that process. And I like Brenda, I came from the agency world, so I know all the tricks, where they try to go around. So, you build the partnership, you prove the proof of concept, and then it's bottom line, it's dollars and cents, right?
Sounds a little personal, Justin. Sounds like you take it personal a little bit.
No, I'm just competitive. I was an agency recruiter for many years and very successful, so I know how they work. Like, when you've been on the other side, it's like a hacker, right? Like the best white hat hackers tended to do black hat hacking in their mom's basement. Like, the best way to combat an agency recruiter trying to get in to your hiring manager or your PM or your, get into certain areas of your business is knowing how they work, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, and I say that with a compliment. But
Yeah,
John,
it's not personal in that sense. It's just business, but
yeah,
you know.
John, to your original point, I mean, the whole an ounce of prevention is worth the pound of cure, right? Setting that tone for it. But one quick question for you around that interview training when they onboard. So in the past, we've created like little flags when a rec comes through and it's the manager's first time running a rec or running a hiring through the company. They may have been hired 8 months ago, and this is the first time they're on their team or an internal promotion. So we would kind of flag that first time hiring manager. So kind of getting back to that training piece, right? The prevention before the cure. Are you recruiters doing the training? Because in my mind, it's setting that onboarding training is kind of setting the recruiters up to have that consultative approach downstream.
Yeah, we have an interesting model. Again, as we've grown, our team's grown a lot lately. It was not that long ago when it was, me and some manila folders. So as we've grown the team, some of the roles, our approach the last 18 months has been, let's hire the person that we think is going to provide the best benefit for us, and let's kind of figure out how that all interacts. I think for us on team dynamics, I know this might be a little longer the answer than you wanted, but the people that we title recruiter, sometimes they end up doing a lot more than that. Sometimes, and then they'll shift into the next title. Because of that, they'll often transition into a generalist role. I look at the team as, and there's 9 people reporting to me right now, in terms of we all have a lot of work to do together and there's some shared work. So when it comes to the recruiters themselves, they aren't necessarily the ones that are coaching the managers. Generally, they're too busy. And so we'll usually have one of our systems people who happens to be excellent at instructing on the technology piece. She and I'll often go into the calls and I'll focus on the philosophy. Hey, here's the philosophy behind why we built this process this way. Here's why it's going to be effective for you. And then she'll come in and do the technology piece and walk them through that very effectively. And then again, the new manager knows, oh, I've got multiple resources. And then we're like, yeah, and if you have any ongoing questions, Sandra is actually the generalist in your department, and she can help you all the other steps of the way, right? So we kind of break the work down, sometimes by function, sometimes by department, on who kind of helps out with those things. But it's always all hands on deck when we're, many people can step into that. That didn't even touch on the L&D piece, which
Right.
Again, where we house the manager toolkit and videos and things there.
Yeah, I love L&D came up in the conversation yesterday around D&I and how I think L&D plays a core role in a successful D&I program to kind of upskill everybody. So I love the fact that you're that connected to L&D.
It is. We just had a big D&I meeting this morning on some stuff that we're getting ready to roll out that again, not relevant to this conversation, but again, I find very interesting.
Excellent. Well, fantastic. Thank you, John. Brenda, can we jump over to you and your item?
Yeah, so I run a sales recruiting team at Udemy. We support the Udemy for Business unit. So like John, we are also in EdTech, but we cater more to enterprise clients, so not in the K-12 space. And we've experienced tremendous 100% year-over-year growth since I started a little over 2 years ago. And so I run a team of about 6 people now, and I give the team a lot of autonomy. I want them to feel empowered to really run their meetings, their relationships with their hiring managers. I tend to be a little bit hands-off. Now, the time that I do insert myself is when there is a rec that's open for a while, there's issues, calibrations on candidates, maybe the interview panel, they aren't assessing the candidates in the right manner, hiring managers' expectations are not aligned. That's when I will insert myself with my team, and I would call another pre-brief meeting. So we do pre-briefs before every first on-site interview. And then we also do debriefs after every on-site interview that takes place. And the pre-brief, the intent of that is really to get the whole interview panel together, understand what profile we're going after, identify different competencies so that it's providing a good candidate experience, and that every interviewer is given an area to assess and probe. And also the hiring manager plays a key role. The recruiter also will guide these meetings and will really be there to help in support of the hiring managers to make sure everyone's on the same page. And then after all of the on-site interviews take place, we'll do a debrief. And again, historically, hiring managers will typically run those debrief meetings, but we're kind of doing something different now where we want our recruiters to run those meetings just because we want them to be more vocal, empowered, really to call out different biases that may come up during debriefs, so that we are evaluating candidates equally across the board, and that we are finding the best talent for that specific role.
Brenda, what would kind of stand out as a flag for you from the debriefs? Because it sounds like they're very conversational, and I could be dead wrong.
They are. Yeah, so we usually will ask interviewers to put feedback into our ATS, which is lever, prior to the debriefs if they can't make it. But when they do, it is very conversational. We'll go through each interviewer, the pros, the cons, where maybe concern areas that maybe they didn't get to, but another interviewer was able to assess further. The common one that I always come across, I always push back on, is culture fit. Like, what does culture fit really mean to you? Like, how do you know they're not a culture fit? Like, how do you define that? And so when we probe in deeper, it might come across like maybe they're lacking some leadership skills that we're looking for, or maybe the communication skills that they may have may rub some people within the organization the wrong way if it's a really high visible cross-functional role. So those are the ones that I find that are the most commonalities, is around culture and whether or not they would be a fit long-term.
So that would kind of fall under the concept of bias in interviewing, right? Is that accurate?
Exactly. Yeah. So there's still more to come there. We have our L&D team that we're working to kind of build out a program where we're actually going to retrain our recruiters to really identify different biases throughout the whole process, so that the recruiters are well aware. Sometimes interviewers, like, we have interview training as well that every single interviewer has to take before they interview candidates. And we created that within our own platform, led by my VP of recruiting. And so we want to make sure that, again, the assessment in the beginning is accurate, as well as at the end of the interview process, just so, again, to eliminate different biases that we now are finding are more common than not, and really being able to kind of listen for those.
Interesting. And when you find an issue, is it you and the manager, or you and the team talking to it?
It's usually the manager and the hiring team, because usually the manager will have one idea of who they're looking for, and then the hiring team will have another idea of what they're assessing for. And so when there's a miscalibration there, that it's so difficult to find that talent. So for us to get together in a collaborative room and really just to have those conversations, I feel eliminates a lot of the misalignment or the unknowns. And sometimes, depending upon the level of recruiter you have on your team, if you have a more senior level recruiter, then they can kind of run those and identify that. My team is mostly made up of kind of mid-level recruiters, mid to senior level recruiters. And so I like to insert myself just to be extra support for them when they're trying to drive some of these meetings with the hiring teams.
Excellent. So to the rest of the panel, can you elaborate, or any comments on what Brenda's speaking to around addressing that, getting specific a little bit here, when you come across biased interviewing, or like the flag of the culture fit? And I got to believe that concept is coming under huge scrutiny these days. But any thoughts around that issue, around addressing and jumping in when you feel like there's some bias going on?
I can jump in real quick. Just we kind of take the same approach as we do on the hiring piece. Let's have a defined process for what happens if we come across it. I agree with Brenda on how you try to coach that out of a situation, especially when it comes to fit. That is a big red flag comment from people, and we kind of try to, whether it's in the hiring process or any part of the process, have, again, available in our toolkit of just, hey, you have an employee coming to you about some bias that you're expressing as a manager. So as a manager now, how do you handle that? And what is that process for you? And so we walk them through that guideline, and it's a part of our ongoing training too. But we address it, again, as a part of the hiring process. Okay, you're going to be a manager. You're going to be hiring. Here are some things you need to be aware of, and here's some language that we don't use here, and here's why. And again, this does not prevent all problems, obviously. But I do think, again, big proponent of the sooner you start talking about something, the easier it is to minimize any ongoing effect.
Stephanie or Justin, anything to add? Yeah.
No, I don't have any.
Got it. All right. Thank you, Brenda. That was thank you for that. Sounds like that's is it an ongoing situation? This is again for all the panelists. Is it this problem you solve bias interviewing at a company that you solve at the company culture level, or is it a manager by manager level? Brenda, I'll go back to you on yours.
I think it's twofold, right? I think it's from a cultural perspective, right? It's a change management, and trying to change the mindset is very different when you're interviewing candidates. It's also from a hiring manager. Because we always have all of these unconscious biases that we already come to the interviews with. And so we also have a course on unconscious bias training, right? To identify what your unconscious biases are, so you're aware of them when you're going into the interviews, so that you're more mindful when interviewing candidates. So I think it's just all about training and just understanding, what you guys are looking for, and then making sure that, again, you guys are comparing candidates equally across the board and taking your biases out of the equation to really evaluate them for the skills and if they match to what we're looking for in that particular role.
Yeah. I only kind of fixate on a little bit because like I started off in recruiting, and then I moved into like systems work. I came back to recruiting, but I was an English major in school, never had any tech classes, but I got some tech jobs because I knew how to interview because I had been a recruiter. So I know how to engage the managers and what they're looking for and the questions they're going to ask. So that's why I get a little bit focused on the subjectiveness of interviewing people and basing your hiring decision on just, a lot of places just base their hiring decision on your interview and your resume, yes, but it's just that subtle, I'm making my best estimated guess on your probability that you're going to be a great employee. I just find that stuff fascinating.
Yeah, another thing I always tell my hiring teams too is that you can always teach the technical pieces, but when you talk about culture, like give me some more tangible items in culture, because culture, it can mean so many different elements, so many different things. But again, that's a piece that if they're going to fit overall with an organization, that's something that isn't teachable. But if they're lacking a couple of different technical pieces, I mean, we're a learning company, so if they're missing X, maybe they don't check off box C's and D's. If they have A and B, then that's the one that we want to take a chance on and give the opportunity for that particular role.
Yeah, kind of getting back to the training piece of it. I used to watch, on average, a hiring manager, how many recs would they have over a year or a 2-year time span? And quite often it was very low, like 1 or 2. And then you'd have other hiring managers that hired a lot because that was the function of the business unit, or they were growing. And I always thought, well, if nobody's really trained you to how to interview candidates, you're kind of off on your own. If your recruiters are just, hey, I'm processing this resume, we'll do an interview time at 2:00 on Thursday, good luck. Right? It's like, well, how do they really know what they're doing? Right? If they're not getting that training or that support, that consultativeness from recruiters and experienced stuff. So, all right, I kind of went on a rabbit hole there. Stephanie, let's jump over to you and to your item.
Hi, everybody. And Sean, thank you for including me on the call today. So I work for a company called Zenetics. We are a mid-sized defense contractor. Justin's with SAIC, not even comparable size-wise. Probably we've got about 1,800 employees, soon to be closer to 2,000 with a recent contract award going on this week. So I'm kind of scattered dealing with that. But we have 5 divisions and also a public relation and public affairs firm that's a part of the organization. So oftentimes I feel like I'm managing the recruiting efforts for 6 different companies doing completely different things. So, and you guys are talking about culture, and I think that's something my company's still trying to define. And also for anybody on listening, when you work for a defense contractor, you have your corporate culture and your indirect positions, and then you have your contract positions supporting the customer, where the culture can be entirely different. So there's not just one culture that everybody fits. So we don't tend to have that issue as much, which is why I really couldn't comment on that. But in the scope of this conversation, I have a team of, there's 8 of us total, a mix of junior and more senior level recruiters. So I tend to step in, and what my topic of discussion was, so I'll try to stick to that, is really prior to an interview even being held. So there's been a lot of talk so far about the debriefing and that sort of thing, but oftentimes we have a requisition that has been open for a while. It's tough requirements, high clearance level, salaries lower than market. So there might be 3 people who can do the job, and the hiring manager's already screened all of them out for reasons that I don't find are reasons to screen out. Maybe they don't like the way their resume looks, or the font they used, or something like that. So when my recruiters are frustrated, and I'm very in touch with every hiring manager in the company, so I typically know what's going on before it gets to a head, but I call it analysis paralysis. So some hiring managers get so bogged down in needing this and needing this. And obviously we need to meet the labor category requirements. But outside of that, sometimes you got to make a move. And they're just getting too bogged down in small details. And I called it petty. Probably not the most professional word, but I think we've all been there. So it's really just stepping in and finding out, you know, what their opinion is on the resume they've seen, what's really going on. Are they unhappy with something the recruiter's doing? Is the communication lacking? Maybe encouraging them to talk to people that maybe based on paper don't look so fabulous, but my team's already screened them and given you information that's really positive. So maybe just talk to them and see if they're a fit. So that's when I tend to step in. There's other reasons, but in the scope of this conversation, that's one of the times I really try to get in and find out, are we doing everything that we're supposed to be doing? And maybe the hiring manager just needs a little finessing on, you know, they need to get out of their own head sometimes.
And Stephanie, do you find yourself having a good success with when taking that approach to getting them to actually look at the candidates?
Typically, yes. Yes. I mean, if they have to really see it as, talk to them for 10 or 15 minutes and see what you think. And more often than not, they will come back and say, I'm so glad you forced me to talk to him, Stephanie, or something like that, because they do find out, you know, resumes need to be strong and they need to be good, but sometimes a person, you know, doesn't have every single detail. And if I feel like there's enough to go on, I really do want to encourage the hiring manager to at least have a conversation. Usually it's successful. Sometimes it's not, and that's fine, but they never give me a hard time, or, you know, you shouldn't have made me talk to that person. They were a waste of time, anything like that.
So when people sign up to be in the audience, I ask them the question, you know, like what is one of your, what did I say here? What do you think a TA leader, or when do you think a TA leader should jump in with the hiring manager? If I could put the responses in some buckets, the two big buckets were kind of at request and at complaint, right? A complaint from the manager about service, or a request from the recruiter. So really from a leadership perspective, keeping an eye on what's going on in your program. When those situations arrive, like in your use cases that you're describing, are they recruiters coming to you? Is it in a report? Is it managers saying, I'm not getting enough qualified candidates? I guess, how are these issues getting up on your radar?
Are you asking me specifically, Sean? Or
yeah, Stephanie.
Yeah. So I have either weekly or biweekly meetings with each division, staffing calls. So on those calls, all of the hiring managers are present along with the recruiters responsible for those programs. So I tend to know where things are going, and so like I said, sometimes before it gets to a head, I can eliminate a problem from happening. So really, I would say communication, and it's very rare that I get complaints from hiring managers, but certainly that would be a time to step in. I try not to get to that point. So, and I speak with my team daily and weekly, in a formal setting, daily, pretty much all the times. And they're very good about coming to me, and I'm so frustrated. I've sent 6 resumes to John and he doesn't like any of them. So then I might call John and, hey John, what's happening?
Right. Got it. Yeah, we used to sort of at a larger size company kind of watch, you know, submittals to interviews, right? To kind of gauge that, hey, are you submitting qualified people? And that was always a flag when that percentage of submit to interview would go, I guess, too low, right? Below a certain mark. That would sort of be like a flag, hey, let's investigate it. Because a lot of times it wasn't the recruiter's issue, it was the hiring manager's issue, to your point about rejection for smaller size reasons before getting them to interview. I think a lot of us had agency experience. We were talking about that. Me too. And I always got brought in. We don't submit resumes. We set interview times. So we wouldn't ask to get an interview. We would only give the resume after we got an interview time. So it made the job a little bit difficult. Some people didn't want to work that way, but it would kind of jump that hurdle of that easy disqualification of a candidate, and come back to what you're saying is, yeah, I'm the recruiter. I'm making my professional consideration on this person that I think they're good for the job. Here's my stamp of approval by submitting them. If it's getting rejected, there's an issue there. I've seen a head of sourcing, just in this maybe your world, where if their sources were submitting candidates and the recruiter was rejecting seeing them, not necessarily the hiring manager, she wanted to be CC'd on every single time a recruiter rejected one of her sources so she could intervene, Stephanie, to your point, rather quickly. I thought that was a leader really backing their team in that regard.
Yeah, we just submit direct to the hiring manager, and we just CC the recruiter for awareness.
Yeah, okay.
So, yeah, I mean, we're going to go direct to source. I mean, we're not, because in our industry, for Stephanie and I, it's so competitive. Within 72 hours, if that sits in the recruiter's inbox for a day, Zenitech or Booz Allen or Lockheed Martin, it's like sharks in the water here. So you got to move at a rapid pace. So it's not because we don't want, like, we're not trying to go around the recruiter. It's literally because we're trying to expedite the process, because I want, offers within 3 days of typically a submittal, right? So submit, interview, offer. So, 72 hours is really my max timeline that I try to push towards, right? For highly cleared staff. Because we're competing like with Booz Allen, for example, that moves really quick. So for me, we're going direct to the hiring manager. If that hiring manager is, squirrely at all, and we're an 80% fit, then myself or some other TA leader, it may be a partnership where we're doing a good cop, bad cop deal. We'll get involved pretty quick. So we have kind of a process down at this point. So I'll partner with other TA leaders because, obviously I'm sourcing. So I'll partner with, maybe one of my recruitment managers, and, I have like 5 different sectors. So I'll be like, hey, listen, we're in an 80% fit. They're pushing back. Not only are we losing revenue, but, Zenitex and Booz Allen is on our heels here. We absolutely need to move on this. And then, using data to really push that with the hiring manager. They, at some point, they're going to have to interview.
Right.
Like, there's no choice.
Yeah.
Right. Ultimately.
Yeah. Brenda or John, anything to add to Stephanie's sort of spot around that screening phase of intervention? We're good? All right. Thank you, Stephanie. I do want to add here real quick, because we're talking about kind of this relationship with managers and kind of setting that culture. I always thought the best relationship that a recruiter could have with their hiring manager is when they get to, kind of what I was just referring to, when they get to skip the submit stage and they go right to interviewing. Years ago, I was having dinner with a recruiter from Microsoft, I think he was, and he would block times on his hiring manager's calendar for interviews that he could put people in. If he didn't have that time filled 48 hours prior to that time, the manager would get his time back. So I thought that's a tight relationship when hey, Mr. and Mrs. Recruiter, I trust you, just book them on my calendar and I'll talk to them. You give them their stamp. I always thought that was the bar. And I also thought you got to win that manager by manager relationship. That's not a culture thing. You got to win that one over and over every time. All right, Justin, let's jump to you and your item.
Sure, yeah. And I think it segues in our previous discussion, but leveraging data to build credibility with the hiring manager, I think this is really big, especially for us, being a larger organization, having a discussion with data, especially dealing with, engineers who respond more to data. They tend to be more obviously left brain and analytical. So, we use a tool called Talent Neuron, which provides market intelligence analysis. And like Stephanie, at times we're not only dealing with the constraints of what our internal hiring team is looking for, but now we also have the constraints of, oh, this is what this government agency is looking for. And those two may be incongruent. So being able to leverage data, not just for your hiring manager, right, to do a market intelligence analysis from, some third-party vendor. In this case, it's Gartner, right, which pulls from like 3 billion data points, completely objective, third party, and then empowering them and leveraging that data so that they can empower themselves to maybe even go back to the government customer with that data to alter the LCATs. So literally you're empowering them to transcend not just this discussion internally, but now I'm empowering and giving you data points to feel comfortable to go back to your COTAR or whomever and actually say, you know, here's this data point, and by the way, I think we need to have a different LCAT. So, you know, these are some things that are unique to the contracting industry, but you know, you can use this. Obviously, you don't have that layer of the COTAR and the government agency, but being able to build that credibility with having that data is really empowering for my talent acquisition organization, not just my sourcing team. You know, we'll run those reports to help, you know, X number of recruiters, and we'll either present that data or partner with the recruiter to present that data to the hiring manager and say, you know, not only am I providing you data on why this is hard, but I'm also showing you that if you alter this requirement, you know, maybe it's not a clearance, maybe it's, you know, a certain certification or years of experience, and being able to provide other solutions that are data driven, right? That empowers not just TA, but it gives us credibility to come in with not just saying, well, this is hard, you got to interview the guy or gal. You know, it's saying, this is why it's hard. These are some solutions. Now, where do we go from here as a partnership, right? Because we've been doing this really successfully. Obviously, there's still, you know, as I'm talking, I'm getting emails of issues probably where I'm going to run different reports. But, you know, the more you can build credibility, especially with a lot of these PMs that grew up as engineers, and build that trust that I'm not coming in here and just saying, well, whatever, it's hard, I can't, you know, it's saying, this is why it's hard. Where do we go from here together for a common solution? And by the way, I'm going to calculate the amount of revenue that you're losing every day you don't have this person, you know, on contract. And Zenitech or Booz Allen's on our heels anyway, you know, or somebody's on our heels anyway. So we better, you know, get to these folks. But I think it's really powerful to run these kind, and you can do it with Career Builder, supply and demand. You know, there's also data you can pull open source, right, using different tools. But you know, I really like Talent Neuron personally. Obviously, this is not a free tool, but I got to say the supply and demand portion, the competitive intelligence, it's been really helpful for the upper echelon of TA. It's not just helpful in terms of dealing like one-to-one, but you know, hey, we want to open a new location somewhere, a new SCIF. What does that look like? And where do we want to open in Louisiana? Do we want to open it in, you know, in the Midwest? What does that population look like? What are the demographics? You know, are there women in that location? Can we have a D&I solution built in, right? So you can get in, you can really scale down into, you know, demographics, salary ranges, geolocations. It goes worldwide. So these are the things you can get into in a very robust way and be completely objective and be a partner with a seat at the table with the business. And I think that's what's important, is having that seat at the table, right? And you can get that through credibility. So that's my main topic area, you know, and we've been successful in doing that.
Yeah, Justin, I think that comes back full circle to what John was addressing, is getting it in from the jump. And I really like the credibility, even if it's like market industry information that you're giving to start a new skill set or location, to even just when you're looking at recs, what I always found that worked as a charm is regular reporting to hiring managers around their departments or teams on a regular basis. And I don't mean recruiters spending their Friday afternoons writing in the spreadsheets and all that stuff, but pulling from the system relevant data to them. That always, because usually when a hiring manager is complaining, it's because they don't know what's going on. So you're kind of staying ahead of the game by giving them that information that answers the questions that they have. And every time we've distributed outside the recruiting team and into the business unit, you'll start with one, and then somebody else in that team will say, well, I'd like to get CC'd on that, and I'd like that. And the next thing you know, your department says, well, can we get something like that for our department? So that's staying ahead of the game and making it this is the way we recruit here. This is how we hire here. Part of our culture, that sharing that information ahead of time is, I think, is part of being that best practice model.
Yeah. And I like to be, as much of a partner with the higher level, engineering staff, because the more we can do that and build credibility and say, this is what that talent community looks like. And these are going to be some of the issues we may have, right? So, yeah.
Excellent. Stephanie, John, anything to add to kind of sharing and distributing the data?
Justin, I love what you said, and I think it's something so important. And I haven't been able to use data necessarily to do it, but defense contractors, you have an LCAT, a labor category taken from a statement of work for, let's say, a network engineer that requires 6 years of experience, IAT level 2, security bachelor's degree, and 100 other things written into the labor category. So as a defense contractor, we have to recruit to that. And then you're out there, you're recruiting, and you can find somebody just as great, perfectly qualified to do the job, but they have 4 years of experience, not 6. And some government customers will be like, nope, they don't have 6, out on with the next. So there have been times when I've really worked with the hiring manager to go to their customer and we've screened this many resumes, not down deep data. I think Justin's is probably more organized. We've talked to 10 candidates, 2 of them turned down our offer, whatever the case may be. Is there a way we can alter these requirements so that we can get somebody through the door? Oftentimes I don't think the government, they just write these labor category descriptions with no thought to reality. We could have I'd love to have a panel on that. But so some customers are understanding and say, okay, well, we'll scratch the degree requirement. And it opens up so many more doors because now we can find those qualifications and the appropriate clearance. We don't have the college degree requirement that really isn't required to do. You don't need a degree to do certain jobs. So, but it's a struggle sometimes. So I like your thought, Justin. Data together to make that happen when it.
And I could say, Stephanie, probably where we turn the needle the most using the data is compensation. Honestly, I mean, that's I understand you bid on this and this was going to be your rat rate, but this is the reality of the labor, right? Like, it is what it is. Now, if you want me to reload somebody from Waukesha, Wisconsin, you better give me some reload budget. Because, to show them, I'll show them, okay, this is what somebody makes in Fort Meade or Northern Virginia, and this is what they make in, these other rural locations. That's fine, but there's nobody there, and you better have reload budget, and, you can't absorb that in your rat rate. So, okay, that brings us back to full circle. Now, we're going to need to come up around 20 grand. So
story of my life.
I will be honest, like the whole scenario of pushing the agencies, that may be 20%, right? Which is still pretty good, but mostly it's an internal, convincing, right? And influencing. So, but it's still, I think it's good to do that and try that, Stephanie, and it still will fall on deaf ears, right? Like you're not gonna, you're not gonna win every battle, but yeah.
And being from Oshkosh, Wisconsin, you will have to have a good reload to get somebody out of Waukesha to Boston or DC for sure.
Yeah. I knew you were from there, Sean.
People still tell me I live in Irvine, California, Orange County. So when I talk to buddies back home, how much you got to pay for a house there? So you know what you can get for that here? I still hear that in 30 years.
It's true.
All right. Well, hey, last comments or questions or notes or anything like that? I know we've gone a little bit over, so I appreciate the time. I know everybody's very busy, especially on a short week. But any final comments or thoughts that we want to add on the topic? Sort of leave open table. We all good?
So I was going to throw in there just earlier, just on that we use vetting tasks for a lot of our roles too, which kind of fill some of that data gap. Just in, for really almost every role, there's some sort of vetting task that they complete. And that kind of helps on the D&I side too. Although then we have to coach on the opposite side of not putting too much weight on that. But
Yeah.
All right, I got to ask,
About, yeah.
what do you mean by vetting task? I've never heard that phrase.
Yeah, like some of them are easy and obvious ones on our teams. Like if we are hiring a mathematician, we want to make sure that they can, pass at the level of expectation for math. But even for almost every role, we do just a basic Excel test, because all of our roles are at least that technical. So just to make sure that they're competent. For video roles, we'll have them do a recording and send it in, all that stuff.
Got it.
Makes
Okay.
sense.
I just never heard that phrase. Interesting. And Stephanie and Justin, all your government lingo, I have no idea what that is. But if Stephanie, to your
Coach R.
panel on it,
Yeah.
find someone
Four, D4.
have at it. I'd be happy to get it going, but I
Yeah.
cannot lead that.
I can give
You
you
need
a
an
whole
acronym
I can give you a whole book of government lingo.
Yeah.
No, thank you. So, all right. Well, hey, thank you everybody very much. Appreciate it again. What's the time? Appreciate the time on a short week. It'll be the weekend again here real soon. So thank you very much, and I will talk to you soon.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
All right, take care.